I never thought a gas station at 2 a.m. would be the setting for one of the most unexpected nights of my life, but here we are. I was supposed to be home hours ago, but my car decided it was the perfect time to give up on me, right there on the side of a nearly empty highway. No cell service, no help in sight, just the glow of a neon sign buzzing over a lonely gas station a few miles down the road. So there I was, walking toward the flickering lights, hoping to find a working phone, or at least someone awake and sane enough to help me figure out a tow or a ride. The cold air was biting, and honestly, I felt a little ridiculous, standing there with my jacket half unzipped, looking like a lost college kid who forgot the one thing he needed. That's when I saw him. He was leaning against the wall next to the entrance, smoking a cigarette like he was waiting for someone, or maybe just killing time. I couldn't tell if he was local or just another late-night wanderer, but there was something about the way he looked that caught my attention. Maybe it was the casual confidence, or how his eyes flicked up when he noticed me, not with suspicion, but mild curiosity. "Need a hand?" he asked, flicking the cigarette away and pushing off from the wall. His voice was low, easy, like he wasn't in any rush to get anywhere but was still polite enough not to just stare. I almost laughed at the question. I mean, what else was I supposed to say? Yeah, my car just died and I'm kind of stuck out here. His smile wasn't flashy or too charming, just genuine. "You're lucky you found this place. Not many people drive around with no phone or backup plans at this hour." I shrugged, feeling the sting of embarrassment. "Yeah, well, you live and learn, I guess." He glanced over my shoulder as if noticing the empty road behind me, then nodded toward the gas station. "Come on inside. You can use the payphone, and I'll figure out what's next. I'm Mike." "Thanks. I'm Jake," I said, stepping inside with him. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed, casting a harsh glow on the aisles of snacks and energy drinks. The clerk gave me a quick nod, but didn't bother coming over. Mike was already at the counter, chatting with the guy like they'd known each other for years. It was weirdly comforting to have someone around who didn't treat me like an idiot for being stranded. We talked about dumb stuff, what kind of coffee the clerk liked, how cold it was going to get later, while I tried to call a tow truck on the payphone. No luck. No signal again. Mike's expression shifted, like he was weighing options. "Look, the last bus won't run until morning, and you can't really sleep here. If you want, I've got a couch not far from here. You can crash there until things sort themselves out." I hesitated. Strangers don't usually offer their homes to stranded guys they just met at gas stations at 2 a.m. And yet, something about the night, the quiet desperation mixed with this guy's unexpected kindness, made me want to say yes. Before I could think too much about it, Mike was already pulling out his phone, ready to navigate us through the next few hours. That's when I realized this night was going to be a lot more interesting than just a car breakdown. Mike's phone screen lit up the dim space between us. He tapped a few buttons, then looked up with a grin that felt both reassuring and a little mischievous. "You're gonna like my place. It's not far, and I promise the couch isn't a death trap." I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from a mix of exhaustion and relief. "Well, that's reassuring. I've had worse couches, but only a few." He smirked and gestured toward the door. "All right then, Jake. Let's get you off this lonely highway before some horror movie scenario kicks in." Walking out, the cold night air hit me again, sharper now that I was moving. Mike's jacket, which he casually shrugged into over his hoodie, looked way better suited for the night than my thin coat. I realized I'd been so caught up in my own mess that I hadn't even noticed how biting the temperature was. His car was a beat-up, older model hatchback, but it had personality. The inside smelled like leather and something faintly woody, maybe a candle or air freshener, but not in a cheap way. It felt lived in, like Mike actually spent time in it, instead of just using it as a way to get from A to B. As we pulled away from the gas station, the silence between us felt comfortable, not awkward. I found myself glancing over at him every now and then, trying to piece together what kind of guy would be out here at this hour, smoking alone, then inviting a stranger back to his place. "So what's your story, Mike?" I asked after a few minutes, my voice breaking the quiet. He glanced over, eyes catching the streetlight for a moment. "Not much to tell. Just work. A bit of freelance writing on the side and trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing with my life." I nodded, feeling a weird sense of kinship in that uncertainty. "Yeah, same here. I'm a bartender downtown. Usually my nights are way busier, but tonight, total disaster." Mike chuckled, shaking his head. "Bartender, huh? So you're used to dealing with all kinds of chaos. Exactly, I said, a small smile creeping onto my face. Chaos, heartbreak, drunken confessions, you name it. He looked over at me again, this time with a softer expression. Sounds like a good story behind that smile. I caught myself for a second. That's the kind of thing I'd usually brush off or joke about, but with Mike, it didn't feel like a setup for a punchline. It felt genuine, like he actually cared. Before I could answer, we pulled up to a small apartment complex, the kind with cracked pavement, string lights loosely hanging from the balconies, and a quiet hum of late-night city life in the background. Mike's place was on the second floor, just a door down from a neighbor, playing soft jazz through an open window. Inside, the apartment was surprisingly cozy. Dim lighting, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, books stacked on the coffee table, and a faint smell of coffee and something sweet baking. Mike tossed his keys on a bowl by the door and motioned toward the living room. Couches that way. Bathrooms down the hall. Make yourself at home. I dropped my bag and sank into the couch like it was the most comfortable thing in the world. After the night I'd had, it might have been. Mike disappeared into the kitchen, and I could hear the faint clink of mugs and the water running. When he came back, he handed me a steaming mug of something that smelled like tea mixed with herbs. Here, for the night owl. I took it gratefully. Thanks. Seriously, you didn't have to do this. He shrugged, smiling softly. Like I said, you're lucky you found this place. Besides, I'm guessing you're not a serial gas station wanderer. I laughed again, feeling lighter than I had in hours. You could say that. We settled into the couch, and the conversation started to flow easier, like we were old friends catching up, rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. He told me about his writing gigs, the challenges of freelancing, and how sometimes the freedom was both a blessing and a curse. I shared some stories from work, the regulars I couldn't help but care about, and the messes I'd cleaned up. At some point, the clock ticked past 4 a.m., but the energy didn't fade. There was something in the way Mike looked at me when he laughed, and the way his eyes softened when he listened, that made me realize this night was already more than just a random meeting. I glanced down at my empty mug and then back at him. Feels weird talking like this, doesn't it? Like, usually people just exchange numbers and disappear. Mike nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. But sometimes, the universe throws you a curveball. Maybe this night was one of those. I wanted to say something that made it clear I felt the same way, but wasn't sure how. Instead, I just smiled and leaned back, letting the quiet hum of the city seep through the open window. It was impossible to know then how much that night would change everything, but sitting there with Mike, I already knew I wasn't going back to the life I thought I had. Not just yet. The morning light crept through the curtains in a way that made me realize just how little sleep I'd gotten, but honestly, it didn't bother me. I woke up on that couch feeling strangely at ease, something I hadn't felt in a while. Mike was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a half-eaten bagel and his laptop open. He caught me staring and gestured to the seat across from him. Morning. Sleep well? Surprisingly, yeah, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Not bad for a gas station couch crash, huh? He grinned, the kind of smile that felt warm and easy, like a sunrise you actually want to wake up for. Told you it wasn't a death trap? I shuffled over, sitting down and taking a bite of the bagel he offered. It tasted like normal, everyday life, but at the same time, it felt like something more, like a beginning. So, what's the plan now? I asked, trying to sound casual but secretly hoping he'd say something like, stick around a little longer. Mike closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Honestly, I was thinking you might want to stay here today. I mean, your car's still dead, and you probably need some time to sort it out. I wanted to protest, say I should get going, but something in the way he looked at me, the way he made this whole situation feel less like a disaster and more like a story, kept me quiet. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. He waved it off. Don't mention it. Besides, I could use some company. This place can get pretty lonely. There it was again. That honesty that made me want to peel back the layers and know more. So I did what felt natural and asked, what brought you out here tonight? I mean, besides the cigarette ritual. He laughed, a sound that was maybe a little self-deprecating. Sometimes I just need to get out of the house, clear my head. Work's been a mess lately, And writing from the same four walls every day can make you feel like you're going crazy. I nodded, understanding that feeling more than I wanted to admit. I know that. Bar shifts, late nights, same faces, same stories. It can get draining. We fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, but full of unspoken understanding. I felt like I could tell him anything, which was weird because we'd just met. But sometimes, the right person shows up at the right time, even if it's a random gas station at 2 a.m. After breakfast, I helped Mike tidy up the kitchen while he filled me in on some of his writing projects. He had this way of talking about his work that made it sound exciting, even though it was a freelance gig that probably kept him on edge most days. By the time the afternoon rolled around, I realized I hadn't checked my phone all morning. No missed calls, no messages, just silence, which was refreshing in its own way. Mike stretched and said, "Want to get out of here for a bit? There's a park nearby. We could grab coffee and just breathe." I hesitated only for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, I'd like that." We walked to a small cafe down the street, the kind with mismatched chairs and vinyl records playing softly in the background. The barista gave Mike a nod like he was a regular, and I felt like I was getting a glimpse into a side of him most people didn't see. Over coffee, the conversation deepened, moving from surface topics to things I rarely shared with anyone. I found myself opening up about past relationships, the ones that had left scars but also taught me what I wanted. Mike listened without interrupting, his eyes steady and kind. When I finished, he reached across the table and lightly touched my hand. "Thanks for trusting me with that." It was a small gesture, but it hit me harder than I expected. I looked down at his hand, then back up at his face. There was something honest there, something that made me want to stay in this moment forever. We walked back to his apartment hand in hand, the city bustling around us but somehow fading into the background. I knew this was the start of something unexpected, something real. When we got back, Mike pulled me close and whispered, "I'm glad you're here." And in that instant, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That night, back at Mike's apartment, everything felt both familiar and new at the same time. We'd crossed some invisible line, but it wasn't rushed or awkward. It was just comfortable. Like the space between us was filled with a quiet understanding, but also this electric tension I hadn't expected. We ended up sitting on the couch again, but this time closer, the hum of the city outside barely noticeable. Mike reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear. It was such a small gesture, but it sent a jolt straight through me. I caught my breath and looked at him, really looked at him. The way the soft light hit his face, the faint crease at the corner of his eyes when he smiled. "Jake," he said softly, like he was testing the sound of my name, "I'm really glad you stayed." I swallowed hard, trying to find words that wouldn't come out in a rush. "Me too. Honestly, I didn't expect any of this." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Neither did I, but sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them." The silence that followed was different from before. It was charged, full of possibilities and unspoken questions. I moved a little closer, and before I knew it, our lips met. It was tentative at first, like we were both making sure we wanted this, but then it deepened, slow and real. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his and whispered, "What happens now?" Mike smiled, his breath warm against my skin. "Now, we figure it out together." The next few days were a blur of lazy mornings, long talks, and stolen moments. I stayed at his apartment, helping him with groceries and cooking dinner together, laughing over bad attempts at recipes and sharing stories about our lives growing up. I learned about his family, his dreams, and the little things that made him who he was. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker, Mike turned to me with that same mix of honesty and quiet strength. "You know, I wasn't sure about letting someone in again. After everything." I nodded, understanding more than I could say. "Me neither. It's scary opening up like this." He took my hand, fingers lacing through mine. "But I'm willing to try if you are." I squeezed his hand back, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer air. "I am, more than I thought I could be." We talked into the night, making plans that felt both practical and hopeful. Mike would help me with the car. I'd find a way to get back on my feet. But what mattered most wasn't the logistics. It was the connection, the way we were building something together from the chaos of two strangers meeting by chance. One day, as I was digging through some old stuff in Mike's closet, I found a stack of notebooks filled with his writing. I leafed through them, amazed by the raw emotion and honesty on every page. He caught me reading and said, "That's my escape. Putting everything down on paper helps me make sense of it." I looked up and smiled. "You should show me more sometime." He nodded, eyes twinkling. "I'd like that." As the weeks passed, the car got fixed, and life started moving again. But something had changed. The loneliness I'd carried for so long was replaced by something I didn't quite have words for yet. Hope, maybe, or the feeling that I belonged. One night, as we lay tangled in the sheets, Mike whispered, "Funny how a broken-down car and a late-night gas station can change your whole story." I smiled against his chest. "Yeah, I never saw that coming." He kissed the top of my head and said, "Me neither, but I'm glad it did." And in that moment, I knew this was just the beginning of a story I wanted to keep writing. With him. Days turned into weeks, and somehow, the routine of life with Mike settled into this comfortable rhythm that I didn't want to break. I was crashing on his couch at first, sure, but it wasn't long before I found my own corner in his apartment. A little nook with a thrifted desk and a stack of random books Mike insisted I read. One lazy Sunday, I woke up to the sound of Mike bustling around the kitchen. He was humming some tune I didn't recognize, but there was this soft smile on his face that made me want to stay in bed forever. I rolled over, watching how the morning light framed him. It hit me again. How strange it was, the way life could throw you into the deep end with a stranger and then suddenly, that stranger becomes your everything. "You awake?" Mike asked, catching me staring. "Yeah," I said, blinking against the sunlight. "Making breakfast?" He grinned. "Pancakes, made from scratch. Want some?" I sat up. The thought of pancakes suddenly making the morning feel less like a Monday. Always. We ate sprawled out on the couch, the kind of casual mess where crumbs ended up on the floor and syrup got wiped on a sleeve. Mike had this way of making even the simplest moments feel special, like they were small pieces of something bigger we were building. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk. The air was crisp, the city buzzing with life slowly waking up around us. We didn't have a destination. We just wandered, talking about everything and nothing. Mike had a way of asking questions that made me think, without ever making me feel judged. So, he said, "Have you thought about what you want next? I mean, besides fixing your car and surviving bar shifts." I laughed, shaking my head. "Honestly, I'm not sure. I used to have a plan, kind of. But after the last few months, everything feels messy." Mike nodded thoughtfully. "Messy isn't always bad. Sometimes messy means change." I looked over at him, the way he said it so quietly but firmly. "You really believe that?" He smiled, eyes crinkling. "Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point?" We kept walking, the conversation shifting to lighter stuff. Favorite movies, weird habits, embarrassing moments. Somewhere in there, we stumbled upon a tiny record store, its windows fogged and inviting. Mike pulled me inside, and suddenly the world outside faded away. He flipped through the vinyls, holding up an old jazz album. "Ever listen to this?" I shook my head. "Not really my thing." "I'll make you a fan," he said, with that confident smirk again. We spent the next hour digging through records, swapping stories about music and memories tied to songs. I found myself laughing more than I had in months, the kind of laugh that bubbles up from somewhere deep down. That night, back at the apartment, Mike sat at his laptop working on some piece, and I curled up with one of his notebooks. I was flipping through pages when he looked up and asked, "Want to hear something I wrote?" "Definitely," I said, setting the notebook down. He read aloud. A short piece about a chance encounter, about finding someone when you least expect it. His voice was steady, but I could feel the emotion underneath. When he finished, the room was quiet except for the hum of the city outside. "That was really good," I said, meaning it. He shrugged a bit, but the faint blush on his cheeks gave him away. "Thanks. It's easier to say it that way than out loud." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "You don't have to be afraid to say things around me." Mike looked at me then, eyes dark and serious. What if I don't want to be afraid anymore? That question hung between us, thick and heavy. I didn't have an answer ready, but I knew one thing for sure. I wanted to be the person who helped him feel safe. In the days that followed, we started sharing more, the kind of stuff you usually keep locked away. Family problems, failed relationships, dreams we were scared to chase. There was this vulnerability that made everything feel raw and real, like we were both slowly unraveling, but also weaving something stronger. One evening, after a dinner we cooked together, with more burnt bits than either of us wanted to admit, Mike turned to me and said, "I've been thinking maybe we should make this official. Not just whatever this is, but something real." My heart skipped a beat. I'd thought about it too, but hearing it out loud made it feel possible. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He smiled, leaning in closer. "Like boyfriend territory. No more hiding or pretending. Just us." I swallowed hard, words catching in my throat. "I'd like that. A lot." He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle. Then it settled. That night, as we lay tangled together, I realized how much had changed since that gas station encounter. What started as a chance meeting had blossomed into something real, something I never planned but desperately wanted. And while the future was still uncertain, one thing was clear. I wasn't alone anymore. Not with Mike by my side. We spent the next few days wrapped up in that new label, boyfriends. It was weird and wonderful all at once, like we were both stepping into a story we'd only just started to understand. There was something thrilling about saying it out loud, letting the words settle in the air between us and knowing they weren't going anywhere. One evening, Mike suggested we check out this little dive bar he used to frequent before he went freelance. I was hesitant at first, bar crowds and all that, but honestly, if I was going to dive back into my old world, it might as well be with him. The place was a cramped little spot with neon signs buzzing and a jukebox crammed into the corner. The bartenders knew Mike by name, and I caught the way the regulars glanced over at us, maybe curious about the new guy. Mike leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "Welcome to my old haunt." We grabbed a corner booth, the kind where you feel like you're hidden away but still part of the noise around you. Mike ordered us drinks, a couple of local craft beers I'd never heard of. We clinked glasses, and I realized how much I'd missed this kind of easy connection. As the night went on, the music shifted to something slower, and Mike reached across the table, taking my hand in his. The way he looked at me made me feel like the only person in the room. "You look good tonight," he said, voice low. I felt my cheeks flush, but I smiled anyway. "Thanks." "You too." He squeezed my hand, and I realized how much I was craving this, normal moments that felt anything but normal when shared with him. Around midnight, the bar started to thin out. People said their goodbyes, and Mike suggested we head back to his place. As we walked through the quiet streets, the city lights casting long shadows, I felt this calm settle over me, like the chaos of the past few months was finally making sense. When we got inside, Mike pulled me close, his hands warm on my back. "I'm glad that night at the gas station led me to you." I looked up at him, the vulnerability in his eyes making my heart beat faster. "Me too. It's crazy how life works sometimes." He kissed me softly, and I felt the world shrink until it was just the two of us. Two guys who found something unexpected in the middle of nowhere. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Mike humming in the kitchen. I stretched and rubbed the sleep from my eyes, feeling a contentment I hadn't known in a long time. "Morning," he said, turning with a mug in each hand. "Morning," I replied, sitting up and reaching for the coffee. We settled onto the couch, sipping and talking about plans for the weekend. Mike suggested a hike outside the city, somewhere quiet where we could just be. "That sounds perfect," I said, already looking forward to getting outside and away from the noise. As the days rolled by, we fell deeper into this pattern of shared mornings, late-night talks, and stolen kisses. But beneath the surface, I could feel the weight of my old life, unfinished business with my car, bills piling up, and the uncertainty of what came next. One afternoon, as I was scrolling through my phone, I saw a message from a tow company confirming my car would be ready by the end of the week. The relief was immediate, but it also stirred this unease. Going back to my old routine felt complicated now. I found Mike in the living room, sprawled out with a book. I sat beside him, hesitating before I spoke. "My car's almost fixed." He looked up, eyes curious but gentle. "I guess I'm gonna have to figure out what to do next. Go back to bartending, find a place to live, all that." Mike reached out, taking my hand. "Whatever you decide, you don't have to do it alone." The promise in his words made me want to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a new path waiting for me, one that included him. That night, we sat on the balcony, the city sprawled out beneath us. Mike rested his head on my shoulder, and I held him close. "Whatever happens," I whispered, "I'm glad I met you." He smiled, eyes closed. "Me too, Jake. Me too." In the weeks that followed, I found myself standing at a crossroads, but this time, it felt different. The car was fixed, the bills were manageable, and the chaotic nights at the bar still waited for me. Yet, what stood out most was the place I had found with Mike. A place that felt like home, even if the walls weren't mine. One rainy Sunday afternoon, we were curled up on that same couch where it had all started, the soft patter of rain tapping against the window. I looked over at Mike, the light catching the gentle lines of his face, and I realized just how much he had become a part of my story. "I've been thinking," I said quietly, "about what comes next. Not just the practical stuff, but us." He turned to me, eyes attentive, waiting. "I don't want to just slip back into my old life, pretending everything's the same. I want to build something, with you, even if it's messy or uncertain." Mike smiled, that warm, easy smile that had a way of making the world feel right. "That sounds good. Real good." I reached out, taking his hand in mine, and felt the steady beat of his heart. It was a small moment, simple and unadorned, but it meant everything. "I don't have all the answers," I admitted, "but I want to figure it out." Together, he squeezed my hand, his voice steady. "Same here." There was comfort in that. Two imperfect guys navigating the unknown, choosing to be present for each other. No grand gestures or fireworks, just the honest decision to stay and try. As the rain softened outside, we leaned into each other. The quiet room filled with a sense of peace I hadn't known I was searching for. It was a beginning, not a fairy tale, but something real and worth holding on to. That night, as I lay beside Mike, I thought back to that gas station at 2 a.m., the chance meeting that had turned everything upside down. Life had a funny way of surprising you when you least expected it. And sometimes, all it took was a little kindness, a shared smile, and the courage to say yes to what felt right. I closed my eyes, feeling the steady warmth next to me, and for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that maybe, just maybe, I was exactly where I was supposed to be.